All right, let's look over Workout Wednesday, week 52, 2018. So, first approach when I looked at the data set is I immediately think of representing multiple events on date timelines as continuous date measures. The problem with that is we had multiple different marks that needed to be represented in the visualization. In order to have a dual axis, I can only have two of these marks. So I need more than two. I had no way of being able to combine these different fields. I couldn't figure out how to get around this. I had to download the TwibX file from the Workout Wednesday blog post to figure out how are they doing this. They've got to be translating this value into some other kind of way. And how? Well, once I downloaded it, it was very apparent that they were converting all these values into integers. Once you convert them into integers, they behave just like you do in Excel. You turn it into the number of days that it is on or after or before January the 1st of 1900. So once I translated all of these date values into an integer, it was really easy to be able to combine multiple different dates into a single pill. So we have the measure values representing the award date, the birth date, and the death date. So really all we were doing is we made a calculated field that just took the award date and wrapped it as an integer. Once we had that done, it's pretty easy to be able to make a dual access, synchronize the access, so that way we could see measure values, and we needed an extra date. We're going to use the secondary value that we put on the pill on the right-hand side here to represent that bar chart and the length of what we're looking for, so the amount of time that that individual was alive from birth until death. So that was a relatively easy thing to do conceptually, regardless of the way the data is represented. You're going to take when they were born, when they died. What's that length? So we use the birth date, and we just use a positive number, positive value to do that. You could have used the death date and then done a negative. It doesn't really matter. Just pick one, and then have a way of being able to go from there. Just birth makes the most sense. I'm born, and then how long do I live before I die? Just logically, that makes the most sense. The rest of the values, so the birth date, the death, and the award, are all going to be represented as a single shape size, and we just go ahead and place that onto the visualization. So creating the timeline, step one. First thing that we do is we take all of these values, these three, the award, death, birth, bring them into measure values, make it a dual axis, and on the secondary, so this birth, this right here that we've made in the dual axis, this birth value date, right now we've got it as analysis, measures are aggregated, we've got the birth on there, and we see our lines are coming up. But the thing that we will notice is, look at this guy, Aaron. You see the beginning of the Gantt chart. No line is drawn. I see an award date. I see a birth date. There's no death date. How am I going to handle this? So what do we do? So on step two, when there isn't a death date, so when that date is null, we're going to give it the date of today. And once we do that, you immediately see that all of these now have a line. The problem is, you'll also immediately notice that the today's date, where that line ends, they're not the same. They don't line up. That doesn't make any logical sense for two reasons. Number one, this is all date. We're just taking a date, we're converting it into an integer. That doesn't make sense. Why doesn't it line up? Well, we're aggregating measures. And the way that we brought this on is upper full name, right? So there's two ways we can handle this. Number one, in a lot of data sets that I use day to day are going to be data sets that have a primary key, some data set identifier that makes that particular record atomic, unique. Now, when you're dealing with data in Tableau, the level of aggregation that it's at has a dramatic impact on the way that you're going to do your analysis. You need to really understand, is the data at its atomic level? Is it aggregated? What does it look like? So in this case, if we look at one of these values that's beyond, where the rest of these dates are lining up as the today date, and we go to view data, we go to full data, we said there are 2 entries. All right, well, the second you look at that, you go, okay, well, somebody can have more than one award. So because it's a sum, I'm going to have the possibility of duplicating or more than duplicating those values of the date being represented as an integer. So how do I handle that? There's 2 ways that you can handle it. If your data set supports primary key, you use a primary key. Another way that you could handle it is this data set here does not have like a primary key. There are ways that I can combine more than one field into a primary key field. So we could take the full name plus, how about the award date? And we'll make that a string because you can't combine. So full name plus award date. That's probably enough. Click OK. Bring the PK on. Is that enough to do it? Yeah, it's not enough to do it. Point of the story is there's more than one way to approach it. In this case, we really don't need any way of uniquely identifying those values. It just doesn't matter. So what we can do instead is just come up to analysis and turn off aggregate measures. And then boom. And that's what we did in step 3 here. Just take off the aggregate measures. Boom. Today ends up on the exact same line. Step 4. We add the reference lines. So today is just the today function, so we can go ahead and here and edit. And you'll see that I frequently am just typing values into the pill field. I'll just go onto the measure or the marks field or the pill columns, and I'll type in some kind of value. And this is a habit that I'm trying to get myself into, where if I know that I'm not going to reuse the same calculated field, I don't want to make a calculated field. More and more calculated fields tend to just kind of clutter up my areas over here in my dimensions and in my measures. And I have more and more that I have to dig through. Now, when I'm doing a one-off analysis, not that big of a deal, but as I have a dashboard that I might deploy into an enterprise production environment, and I'm doing iterative life cycles pretty rapidly on that, I might create more than one calculated field and not necessarily keep that around. And it takes a lot of additional bandwidth and time to comb through and purge unnecessary fields like that. So it's worth getting into the habit of taking the time. Do I really need to make that extra calculated field? Am I only using it once? How do I want to handle that? So we add those reference lines to the visualization. We have the very first day in December 1901 for when the Nobel Prize was first awarded, all the way until today. Step 5. Format. Formatting is relatively simple. We're just going to go through the process, the information that's available in the blog post for color palette to use, and placing the right colors onto the dashboard are relatively easy. Where I personally was surprised was bringing on more than one field onto a color mark. Now in the past, if I wanted to try and do this, I would just drag the field on. This is a bad example. Where's measure names? Bottom. You bring it on and it nukes the other one. Well, I also want category. Can I bring on category? Sure, but then it replaces measure. If you hold down either control or command if you're on Mac, and you take both of those, now you see that you've got more than one pill stacked, and you drag it on, and boom. What's really surprising to me about this as well is the way that this is represented in the text order is based off of the order that the pills are placed on the marks card. So when category comes before measure names, and measure names comes before category, it becomes a different way for you to be able to look at this. How do you want this binned? It all depends on your colors that you're applying. So once you're done with that, you've now got your final sheet. The filter is created. I love doing filters like this. Whenever you have a category or a, I'm going to go ahead and close this because I made a bunch of changes to them. Whenever you have a legend that you want to apply to a visualization, the way that it's default represented in Tableau, I'm not personally a big fan of. It's difficult to work with. It's hard to kind of control specifically and precisely how it is that I want those colors to be represented. So as much as possible, and I've noticed this is very much a popular trend among these Workout Wednesday posts, is to create a separate sheet. If I'm ever in doubt, I tend to create a separate sheet. It's relatively simple. I'm really depending on the same, in this case, category is how we're going to be filtering this. It's also the legend. So it's a legend, color legend, but it's also the filter. So I place category pill onto either the columns or the rows, and then I place the exact same category pill onto the color mark card. And depending on the way that I want this to represent, as I want this straight across. I want to be able to have a column. It's just simply moving this around and trying to do this with bringing onto the dashboard and clicking on here, going to legends and going to the color legend and trying to turn that on and then format it in a way that works for you. Not a big fan. We're used to creating separate sheets for all sorts of different functions. So really we're just dragging these two, the same pill in two different spots, easy peasy. Again here, we're doing an upper of category. There's a lot of capitalization that happens in these challenges. I didn't really want to create a separate pill for that. So it's pretty easy to just type into anywhere that you want and do something for it. In this case, sum of, name, whatever it is, you can go ahead and do. And once you've created that pill, you can drag it wherever you see fit. The sort. So we create the sort with a parameter, and I went ahead and just said, you go and look at what is that visualization doing on Tableau Public. Without downloading it, you just interact with it and say, what are the different options that we're looking for? And I always write them down on a piece of paper. I write them down. Say, what do I got? I've got an alphanumeric, I've got birth, death, and prize, both from the oldest to newest and newest to oldest. I just wrote those different combinations out. Here are the values. Here are how they displayed. Another calculated field is some if statements, where if it's alphanumeric, then ASCII. Now, there's probably a better way to do this, and this is another thing that I personally I did not think of. I download the Twibex file from the challenge and go like, what are they doing? And then once you look at it, you're like, oh, well, of course, that's great. But the thing with ASCII is it only returns the code value of the first character in the string. So if you've got an individual with more than one name, I'm not 100% sure, and I haven't tied this out as to does it properly alphabetical sort. I'm not sure, but it gets you pretty darn close. There's ways you could get around that. Then we just do the date difference between the day that they were born and today's date for the rest of those date categories. And the rest of those are relatively simple. Then you come to the pill on, in this case, the upper of their full name. Click on sort, field, sort field, and you just use average. The median doesn't really. And it goes in the order that you selected. Then you combine them all into a single dashboard, and you've got your interaction. You turn on the interaction by dashboard, actions, category filter. Using filter, impacting timeline, on select. Once you clear it, it shows all values. And that is a quick walkthrough as to how we put together this week's 2018 Week 52 Workout Wednesday Challenge.